Coming up on KCCI 8 News Close-Up, Iowa's new abortion restrictions on pause. Why Governor Reynolds says she's confident the Iowa Supreme Court will eventually put them back in place. And 6 presidential candidates took the stage at Iowa's Family Leadership Summit, how each tried to convince the crowd that they're Republicans' best hope to retake the White House.
This is Iowa's news leader. This is KCCI 8 News Close-Up.
Good morning. Thanks for joining us. Welcome to Close Up. I'm KCCI Chief Political Reporter Amanda Rooker. Last week, Governor Kim Reynolds gave her first public update on Iowa's new government structure. She signed the massive new reorganization plan last April, reducing the number of state agencies from 37 down to 16. The governor also announced Iowa now has a new logo. You can see it right there, Freedom to Flourish. That state brand will soon replace the old Fields of Opportunity slogan on welcome signs and states. We also spoke with Reynolds about the legal battle over the state's new abortion restrictions. And for the first time, she publicly addressed criticism from former President Trump, who says Reynolds owes her election victories to him. Tell me a little bit about why you feel confident that the Iowa Supreme Court will uphold the law, and do you think that they'll approach it differently than they did a few months ago?
Because I think the law is constitutional. I think they got it wrong the first go around here a couple of months ago. I think that especially when we had the United States Supreme Court say that the Constitution doesn't guarantee a right to an abortion, and followed up with, well, I guess we were first. The Iowa Supreme Court said that the Iowa Constitution doesn't guarantee a right to abortion, followed up by the Supreme Court where they implemented rational standard. Justice Mansfield indicated they would wait until they saw how the Supreme Court ruled. They did, and I think the bill that we passed is constitutional, especially with the changes that we've seen. So that's why I said that. I feel that it's a good bill. It is law. We passed it. It went into law. For 3 days we were saving babies, and then the temporary injunction was filed. So I think the right to life is the most important right that we have, and without it we have nothing.
Do you owe your 2018 election victory to former President Trump?
You know, I owe it to the Iowans who actually put their trust in me. They put their trust in me in 2018. It was a tough year for Republicans. I was one of the few that made it across the finish line, and then I overwhelmingly won in 2022. So I am grateful and honored and proud to serve as governor of the state of Iowa, and I appreciate Iowans putting their confidence and trust in me. I'll tell you one thing, Iowans are fiercely independent, and that is one of the reasons we do the Iowa caucuses first in the nation as well as we do, because they are fiercely independent, they're engaged, knowledgeable on the issues, and they're going to continue to ask all of the candidates really tough questions.
Would you, in light of President Trump's criticism of you, I mean, are you sticking to your pledge to stay neutral in the caucuses, and would you appear with him at an event?
Oh, absolutely. I've invited him to the Fireside Chat. So we've invited anybody that is a presidential candidate and has filed is invited to come to the Fireside Chat. And so he has been invited, so hopefully he'll take that opportunity to show up. I think it's a great way for Iowans to see kind of a different side of our candidates. Who wouldn't want to come to the Iowa State Fair? They all were planning on being there, and so this kind of gave me an opportunity. They're inviting me to their events, so I thought it would be an opportunity for me to invite them to this one and just maybe show a different side of the candidates. So we'll see. We've had really good turnout. The first 3 days are full. We're going to be releasing that schedule shortly, so stay tuned. But we've had really good response, and I'm just excited about it. And I am excited to be in my blue jeans, my bling belt, and my cowboy boots, and to be at the State Fair every single day, hugging and talking to Iowans. I get to interact with more Iowans than I could at any other event or any other thing that I do in the state. It's amazing the number of Iowans and kids and families that I get to interact with, and I love it.
Are you going to be the one interviewing? Are you going to be the one interviewing the candidates?
Yeah.
And if so, how are you going to decide what to ask?
Well, you know, I want to try to keep it consistent, so we haven't sat down and thought about that. But yeah, I'm going to be the one. I'm going to be the one interviewing them. So I want to have a little bit of fun, but I also thought, you know, I might reach out to Iowans and try to see if they've got some questions for some candidates. So I might have a couple of the questions actually come from Iowans. We might put together some fun ones that we think would be interesting to ask them. So those will be. I'm going to try to keep it as consistent as I can, because I think that's important.
Still to come on Close Up, election integrity, what 2 presidential candidates say needs to be done to restore Republicans' faith in the election process. Iowa's First in the Nation caucuses are less than 6 months away, and Republican presidential hopefuls are crisscrossing the state, working to convince Iowans that they're the best candidate to take back the White House in the November 2024 election. Well, 6 of those candidates spent time in Des Moines in front of thousands of Iowans' social conservative voters. Each candidate got 25 minutes at the Family Leadership Summit for an on-stage interview with former Fox News anchor Tucker Carlson. Carlson questioned former Vice President Mike Pence about the January 6th attack on the Capitol and the results of the 2020 election.
Well, as I said on January 6th in my communication to the Congress, and have said many times since, there were irregularities in the 2020 election. There's no question. There were about a half a dozen states that changed the rules of elections in the name of COVID.
Yep.
And that undermined public confidence in the outcome of our elections. Now, at the end of the day, we brought more than 60 lawsuits, states engaged in recounts. And when states ultimately certified and courts upheld those changes in virtually every instance, and ultimately we were able to determine that the changes, there was no evidence that the changes had changed the outcome of the election in any way. I knew that my duty was clear that day. But candidly, as I've said before, President Trump's words that day were reckless. I believe whatever his intentions in that moment, it endangered me and my family and everyone that was at the Capitol that day. I believe history will hold him accountable for that, just as the law will hold everyone that engaged in acts of violence. But what I believe, Tucker, is that states govern elections. States ought to conduct our elections. In fact, our founding fathers debated this at the Constitutional Convention. It was one of the reasons why I believe that my duty was very clear on that day, despite the fact that my former running mate continues to hold the view that I had the right to overturn the election. I had no right to overturn the election. The presidency belongs to the American people and the American people alone. I had no right to reject or return votes that day, and Kamala Harris will have no right to overturn the election when we beat them in 2024. But this principle of state control of elections is absolutely vital. I think there's plenty of opportunity to advance election integrity reforms around the country. As long as we don't intrude on the independence of states to conduct elections and to manage their elections, there are ways the federal government could provide resources and encourage reforms. And if I'm President of the United States, I promise you, we'll fight every day to restore public confidence in the elections in this country.
Election integrity, a big focus at that event. Also, former United Nations Ambassador Nikki Haley gave her pitch on improving election integrity. She talked about the extra election precautions that she put in place when she served as governor of South Carolina.
What you can learn from it is what we did in South Carolina. I said in South Carolina, if you've got to show picture ID to buy Sudafed, if you've got to show picture ID to get on a plane, you should have to show picture ID to protect the integrity of the election process. So, and we have to make sure election integrity is something we don't ever stop. You have to continue over and over. We've had some states who've done some great things and they've put voter ID in place, and that's been great. We still have some other states who haven't done anything, and we need to make sure we're doing what we're supposed to. I mean, we saw during COVID, a lot of secretaries of state changed rules without getting state legislative support. We saw a lot of that happening. We saw a lot of mail-out balloting. We've got to make sure we continue to fight to make sure we have integrity in the election process. Because I saw at the United Nations, when you have your people lose faith in an election system, that's the first crack of a country falling apart. We have to keep fighting for this. We have to make sure we get it done.
Yes.
I think we all know that there were irregularities in there and that there were some issues that happened. We know that there was mail-out balloting that shouldn't have happened. Do I think that changed the results of the election? No. I mean, I think President Biden ended up winning the election. But I think at the end of the day, it showed we've got a lot of work to do in terms of election integrity.
So you mentioned mail-in ballots. Would you restrict that if you're president?
Yeah, I don't believe in mail-out ballots. I mean, if you do absentee ballots, in South Carolina, what we did is we did voter ID. We did absentee ballots, but you had to verify they were who they were. You matched up signatures. We counted them as they came in, so there should be no reason you're getting results 2 weeks out. That should never happen. And you have to make sure that people, and you have to keep cleaning your rolls so that dead people don't vote. I mean, that's a huge thing that we've got to do. And so I think we should always keep pushing for that. I mean, I think that you need to show the people of your state that they can trust the system. I always put a lot of weight in that in South Carolina. I wanted to make sure that every South Carolinian knew that we had fair elections, that we had verified elections, and that we were making sure that there were no dead people voting and no people duplicate voting. And I think every governor should make sure that that doesn't happen in their states. And I think that you also go a step further. Congress should also have oversight of election integrity to make sure if we have to change things. A lot happened during COVID. Learn those lessons and say, how do we make sure it doesn't happen again? I think we've got some opportunities there.
And next on Close Up, Florida's environmental changes. Ron DeSantis gives his take on climate change and the action he's taken in Florida. And Iowa passed a law earlier this year banning gender transition procedures for minors, while former Arkansas Governor Asa Hutchinson says he vetoed a similar law in his state. Welcome back to Close Up. We're bringing you moments from the recent Family Leadership Summit in Des Moines. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis shared how he's tackling environmental challenges facing Florida and how that could translate to his policy if he were president.
Well, we've actually created an infrastructure in Florida, and I think it's a good thing because, like, the Democrats and the left, they talk about, global warming, they're going to change the climate. Them forcing you an electrical vehicle is not going to change the climate when China is building a new coal plant every week. I mean, so just give me the break. This is trying to control your behavior. It's social engineering, and it's not something that's going to work. So what I've said in Florida is, okay, Democrats, I'm actually going to focus on the environment that Floridians like and enjoy, and that makes our state unique. So we tackled both blue-green algae, Everglades restoration, and red tide. We've created infrastructures and task force. We have money that will go in to do. So there's a lot of experiments being done on red tide right now with the program we put in, but you have to make a decision. maybe it works in a lab, but if you do it out in the Gulf of Mexico, is it going to have any other cascading effects? So that's what they're studying right now. We think that there's some things that are going to be very good. Now, red tide is natural. I think most people know that. It's been detected going back into the 1800s. But what can we do to mitigate it, and what can we do to prevent being exacerbated? But we've done very well on environment, not because I'm doing kooky liberal things, but because I'm focusing on things that actually impact the daily lives of Floridians. And oh, by the way, I've never come to Iowa without someone coming up to me that they tell me they spend time in Marco Island or Sarasota or wherever, and I see half the Midwest down in Southwest Florida during the winter months. But what ended up happening was, I think we drew people who believed in what we were doing. It wasn't just these were liberals who just wanted no state income tax. There may have been some of those, but I think most of these people said, you know what? Florida's a free state. I'm not dealing with these lockdowns. Florida has kids in school. I'm not going to not have my kids be able to be in school. Florida has a 50-year low in the crime rate. I don't want to see rioting in my neighborhood. So there were a whole bunch of reasons why people did it, but the political orientation of it actually turned out pretty good.
So you're getting the good ones.
We're getting good ones. And you know what? We're converting people too. I mean, that's, I think, something that we have to do as a movement. You know, you can't just preach only to the choir. I want to get some other people who may not have voted Republican in the past and get them on our team. And we've done that in Florida in record numbers.
Former Fox News anchor Tucker Carlson also pressed former Arkansas Governor Asa Hutchinson about a controversial veto that Hutchinson made. While Governor Hutchinson vetoed a bill banning gender transition procedures for minors, that veto was overturned by the Arkansas legislature and made changes similar to a plan that Iowa Governor Kim Reynolds signed into law earlier this year.
Well, first of all, I want to ask, how many of you all are parents in this room? I'm a parent as well, and what I believe in is that parents ought to raise their children. I believe that parents ought to be in control, and I also believe in the Constitution. I believe that God created two genders, and that there should not be any confusion on your gender. But if there is confusion, then parents ought to be the one that guides the children. That, to me, is an important fundamental principle. Now, obviously, you could take it too far, and if there would have been a bill that said you should not ever have transgender surgery as a minor, I would sign that in a minute, because no parent should be able to consent to that permanent change. But this bill did go too far. It was unconstitutional. It interfered with parents, and so I sided with parents on that bill in managing the most sensitive issue that a parent can face. And I believe in a limited role of government. And so, you know, I don't think that California ought to be able to tell parents, you need to have gender-affirming care for the children. The government should not do that. And in the same way, let's keep the government out of it unless it's that extreme case, and let's let parents guide the children. I stand with parents. And whenever you look at children and what they're challenged with in life, I think it's important that in the most sensitive issues that parents are able to guide them through that challenge. And so I don't like the schools pushing transgenderism. I don't want the schools, for example, when President Obama issued the order from the Department of Education that you ought to have bathrooms in the schools that the children can choose what their gender is and go to which bathroom they think they are that day. I said that is not consistent with the law.
South Carolina Senator Tim Scott told crowds at Iowa's Family Leadership Summit about the role that faith plays in his life and campaign. In a one-on-one interview, we asked Scott why he told some voters he might not be their guy.
I will work for the people. Let me tell you what I'm running on, and this is really simple. If you take out a loan, you pay it back. Number one. Number two, my mother worked 16 hours a day as a nurse's aide. She'd come home after changing bedpans and rolling patients, and she taught me one very valuable lesson. There is dignity in all work. Therefore, if you're able-bodied, you work. That's called America. Number three, if you commit a violent crime, you go to jail. Period. Number four, men should compete in sports against men. And number five, our southern border is the major national security issue our nation faces. Closing our southern border because of the national security risk that it poses is absolutely in America's best interest, period. And for those who don't like common sense conservative principles driven by the Judeo-Christian Foundation, choose another candidate. It's that simple.
If a voter's not looking for a common sense conservative candidate rooted in Judeo-Christian values, they can vote for someone else.
Yes.
Why is it important for you to take that stance?
Well, no, I just think the truth of the matter is a simple one, that America is built on the Judeo-Christian foundation. It's the value system that comes from the gospel that is really important to the future of this nation, because it is historically the only system that actually allows for humans to flourish to the highest limit possible. When I talk about you can go as high as your character, your grit, and your talent will take you, it's because in America we have a system that allows for individuals to succeed and to prosper. I want that for all Americans. Where does that come from? We are rooted in that concept because of our foundation. And so every candidate, I would hope, would embrace the same philosophy. But voters who don't want a candidate who understands and appreciates American history, and we've seen the progress because of our foundation, I'm probably not your guy.
And Governor Reynolds was also signing an abortion law at that event. Vivek Ramaswamy supported that, and he told crowds why he says that makes an example of why Iowa's government is working well.
So the first thing I want to say is I was here on the day that the legislature adopted that, and I made it a point to be here because I think it was a celebration of life, but it was also a celebration, more fundamentally, of a three-branch system of government at work. The judicial branch gave a 3-3 tie, an indecisive ruling. The duly elected legislators and governor of this state did what the people of this state told them to do, gave them a mandate to do. And so what I loved about it is Governor Reynolds and none of those legislators, they weren't hiding the ball. They've said this is exactly what they were going to do. They were elected by wider and wider margins by the people, and then they delivered on the thing that they said they were supposed to do. That is how the system is supposed to work. And so I think it was a celebration of a three-branch system of government. I think it's a celebration of federalism, states now stepping in to fill the void created in a post-Roe world. And I think that's what I think was most remarkable about what we celebrated today.
Some of your opponents have suggested that a 15-week ban would be something more Republicans could come to on a national consensus than a 6-week ban. Where are you on 6 weeks versus 15 or something else?
I think that states that adopt a 6-week ban are on perfectly solid footing to continue and see that through, as it was the case here in Iowa. I am personally pro-life. I believe that unborn life is life. And I think that going through the democratic process to accomplish that is perfectly legitimate. And I think the way we will deliver national unity in this country, and I do care deeply about national unity, is not by compromising on our principles. It is by being uncompromising about our principles. And the way I see building unity around this issue is to talk more about actually how we stand up for true pro-life decisions, adoption, childcare, talk about more sexual responsibility for men, something that we don't talk enough about in an era of genetic paternity tests. As I've traveled this country, I asked people the example that Clarence Thomas gave during the Dobbs case, which was pregnant woman walking down the street, assaulted, unborn child dies as a consequence. You find me one American in this country who says that that criminal does not deserve liability for that death. The fact that I haven't found one yet says that we're more united on this issue than we make it seem, but we have to do our part as conservatives to stand up, to make this less of a women's versus men's issue. It's not a women's rights versus men's rights issue. It's a human rights issue.
Thank you for joining us for KCCI 8 News Close Up. We'll see you back here next Sunday. Have a great day.